everybody hear me? Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction, David. My name is Christina Entcheva, as he mentioned. I'm a senior director, as of 3 days ago, of software engineering at GitHub. Thank you. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you all. I hope you all are awake. I know it's just me between you and the mixer. I promise I'm going to try to make it worth your while. I'm here to talk about something that I care about a lot, and that is ethics and technology, specifically in the age of AI. And today I'm going to deep dive into a case study to illustrate some of the ethical challenges in our society and how those ethical challenges are perpetuated, replicated in technology, including AI applications. So we'll talk about some strategies to mitigate those risks as well. I work at GitHub. GitHub is a developer platform focused on collaboration, productivity, security, and scale. And in the past few years, we have been focusing on bringing AI into your daily software development lifecycle. At GitHub, I work on Copilot. Copilot is an AI-powered pair programmer. It helps you write good code. I'm going to talk about some GitHub things and some Microsoft things that I have personal experience with, but this is not a sponsored talk in any way. This talk is going to cover some sensitive content. Hopefully it's not going to come as a surprise that a talk about ethics is going to discuss race and gender and some of the challenges that we have as a society. I feel confident that we can all be kind and curious and get through it together. So it's an exciting time for artificial intelligence. The industry is absolutely abuzz. Large language models have hit the mainstream. There's currently a lot of opportunity for innovation across many industries, and enough hype that some people are even calling it an AI tech bubble. Some will have you think it's going to end up a little bit more like this, a dystopian vision where AI ends up beyond human control, it's able to determine its own destiny, threaten our civilization's very existence. At least that's what I'm hearing around the Thanksgiving dinner table. So, that dichotomy is, of course, overly simplistic. The reality is much more nuanced than that. In 2020, Modern Diplomacy wrote this article titled, "AI is neither the Terminator nor a benevolent super being." Exactly the point I'm trying to make. In this article, I came across this quote, "Technologies themselves are ethically neutral. It's the people who decide whether to use them for good or evil." Unfortunately, I'm actually here to argue exactly the opposite of this point. Technologies themselves are not ethically neutral. So I'm here to argue that despite our best intentions, technologies meant to be neutral or even benevolent can and do cause harm often to the very people that they mean to protect. And that it's actually our responsibility as leaders in this industry to have these conversations, to influence change, and to mitigate risk. So one of the reasons that technology is not neutral is that data sets are infallible. They're incomplete, they're unbalanced, and to illustrate what I mean by that, I'm going to do a deep dive on predictive policing as a case study. Has anyone here heard of Predpol? Raise your hand if you have. Anybody? A couple people? So Predpol is a predictive policing software. It aims to provide targeted real-time crime prediction. Law enforcement agencies subscribe to this service, and it helps them, in theory, it helps them predict where crime will occur in the future, and then they deploy officers to that location. So Predpol uses their own patented algorithm to predict where crime will occur. It's based on what's known as the ETAS model. That's epidemic type aftershock sequence, and it's the standard statistical model of seismicity, so predicting earthquakes. And in this case, it's applied to crime prediction. So similar to earthquake prediction, Predpol's algorithm looks at data from previous crimes to predict locations of future crimes. The data input is citizens' calls for police service, somebody calls the cops, or patrol officers observe crime reports out in the field. And then the Predpol database logs crime type, crime location, and the date and time of the crime. So in the software, the red squares in the system are predictions for crime that specific day. Officers use those predicted crime hotspots to guide their patrols, and any crime that the patrol officers observe while on patrol is added back to the Predpol database. So what happened? Well, first of all, I think it's important to start with this point and really drive it home. Predpol does not work. So in 2023, Wired did an analysis of Predpol predictions and found that their predictions were correct less than 1% of the time. Yeah, so they analyzed almost 24,000 predictions for the Plainfield, New Jersey Police Department, and they found that the prediction rate was accurate 0.4% of the time for all predictions overall, 0.6 for robbery and aggravated assault only, and for burglary, the accuracy rate was 0.1%. So I work in AI products. I disclosed that at the beginning. I can tell you AI products are not 100% accurate. A 1% accuracy rate is not going to survive as a product on its own merit in the industry, full stop. But backing up a little bit, even before this research from Wired came out in 2019, the LAPD swapped out PredPol with another kind of similar predictive policing system, and then eventually they ended up abandoning both of them, and they no longer use predictive policing. And then in 2020, Santa Cruz, California became the first US city to ban predictive policing outright. And lots of publications, both news outlets and academic journals, wrote articles about how problematic predictive policing is, both showing data and opining that predictive policing perpetuates bias and is racist. So why are so many publications and academic journals writing about this? What is the problem with predictive policing? So I'm contending that the data suffers from two big problems. The first one, what I'm calling overrepresentation, and then the second one is a self-reinforcing feedback loop. So let's talk about overrepresentation first. So here we have two side-by-side maps. On the left, we have drug arrests by the Oakland Police Department from 2010, and on the right, the 2011 National Survey on Drug Use and Health on self-identified drug users in Oakland. So we can see there's a big difference here between the people who say they do drugs and then the people who get arrested for doing drugs. So what accounts for the difference? In 2021, the Markup published an article where they analyzed the demographics of neighborhoods that PredPol predicted crimes for. And after analyzing over 5 million predictions, the Markup found that neighborhoods with higher populations of white residents consistently had fewer crime predictions than neighborhoods of color. This pattern repeated across dozens of cities that use PredPol, including California, Massachusetts, Washington State, and more. Neighborhoods that the software targeted for increased patrols were more likely to be communities of color and those who qualify for federal free and reduced lunch. And the software also recommended daily patrols in and around public and subsidized housing. Residents of neighborhoods with PredPol suggested fewer patrols tend to be whiter and more middle or upper income, and many of these areas went years without a single crime prediction compared to the many thousands of predictions in communities of color. So remember, the input is data from previous crimes, which means the data set focus is on crimes recorded, not actually crimes committed. It's an incomplete census, and it's also not a representative random sample. So completely separate from PredPol, just as a little bite of something different, this research study published in 2021 looked at a different algorithm trained on victim crime reporting in Bogota, Colombia. So PredPol's inputs are people calling the cops and observed crime by police officers. This is focusing on reports of victims only. And still, so different algorithm, different reporting mechanism. These researchers found similar types of misattributions. So essentially, instead of predicting hotspots in high crime areas where there was low reporting, it diverted the predictions into high crime areas that already have high reporting. So in both cases, the data we already have on file can skew the predictions, regardless of how many crimes are actually occurring in that area. And actually, there's decades and centuries of criminological research dating as far back as 1897 that highlights the disparity between recorded crime and actual crime. And the differences in which neighborhoods get observed, policed, and have crimes recorded align around racial and economic differences. This shouldn't surprise us because policing neighborhoods of color has deep roots in American history. So 2010's The Condemnation of Blackness posits that a turning point came in the early 1900s when police forces started focusing on using crime statistics to guide law enforcement. Harvard historian Jill Lepore cites Muhammad by summarizing, police patrolled black neighborhoods and arrested black people disproportionately. Prosecutors indicted black people disproportionately. Juries found black people guilty disproportionately. Judges gave black people disproportionately long sentences, and then after all of this, social scientists observing the number of black people in jail decided that as a matter of biology, black people were disproportionately inclined to criminality. And in fact, as far back as the 17th century, On the Surveillance of Blackness, Simone Brown writes about lantern laws in New York City, which demanded that black, mixed race, and indigenous enslaved people carry candle lanterns with them if they walked around the city after sunset, not in the company of a white person. So in considering overrepresentation of communities of color in police data, we also get kind of a hint at the next problem with predictive policing, which is a self-reinforcing feedback loop. So you may remember that officers update PredPol with each new criminal incident reported and observed, recording crime in an area they're already dispatched to. The sampling bias in the training data gets amplified, causing a runaway feedback loop. So in the Oakland study, there was a simulation exercise that researchers did based on drug crime data, and this feedback loop was found to occur and, if enacted, would have led to like hyper surveillance of already over-policed neighborhoods. The researchers who ran the simulation found that people of color were twice as likely to be targeted as white people, even though we know from surveys that the actual drug use is evenly distributed across racial groups. These dimensions are particularly relevant in predictive policing, and it's a useful case study for discussion, and it's like reasonably well known in mainstream media, but the concepts are generally extrapolatable in general. So for example, with like reward hacking, right? So an AI deployed to like increase Twitter engagement may make their tweets more and more controversial, which increases engagement, but it also increases toxicity. Or if anybody remembers Tay, the short-lived 2016 Twitter AI chatbot that went offline just 16 hours after launching, Tay was taught to be racist and anti-Semitic by people on Twitter in a matter of 16 hours and had to be shut down. So, just a bit about that self-reinforcing feedback loop. Before we move to mitigations, I just want to quickly focus on the problem of underrepresentation. So overrepresentation has adverse outcomes for communities of color, and unfortunately that pattern holds true in scenarios of underrepresentation as well. So for example, medical training for treating patients with darker skin colors is lacking. And then when it comes to dermatological issues, there's less representation of dark skin in textbooks and in resident programs. That results in disparities in physician accuracy on dark skin versus light skin. And then when you apply those principles to AI, that disparity is then mirrored by the AI tools. So Northwestern wrote about this photo-based medical diagnosis AI app that perpetuated the same racial bias. So, back to predictive policing just for a GIF. PredPol doesn't use facial recognition technology, but other AI services that police departments subscribe to do use facial recognition. And surprise, these technologies can't tell Black people apart. Amazon's Recognition is a service used by police departments across the US. This data is from 2018, and it shows that Recognition is 100% accurate when tasked with identifying images of lighter-skinned men, but only 68.6% accurate when attempting to identify Black women. And as you can imagine, that lack of accuracy can have dire outcomes when you combine mistaken identity, policing, and being Black in America. In the workforce realm, in 2023, a research study found that AI tools replicated gender bias in recommendation letters of hypothetical employees. So ChatGPT deployed nouns such as expert and integrity for men, but was more likely to call women beauty or a delight. Men were respectful, reputable, authentic. Women were stunning, warm, and emotional. In 2018, Amazon's AI recruiting tool got canned after demonstrating bias against women. The system taught itself that male candidates were preferable. It penalized resumes that included the word women's, as in all women's chess club captain. It downgraded graduates of all women's colleges. And the system was trained on data from Amazon, which had historically employed mostly men. So to the AI, women were seen as kind of like an undesirable anomaly in the system. So these are like not examples of nefarious actors, right? No one is like trying to do these things on purpose. On the contrary, people are doing their best to improve the lives of others, increase safety, and improve public health. So, just to go back to the thesis of this talk, despite our best intentions, technologies meant to be neutral or even benevolent can and do cause harm, sometimes to the very people they mean to protect. Technology is not ethically neutral. This is a very hard problem. Models learn from data, and the data is imperfect, and it will take many, many of us and lots of time to course correct centuries of fallible data. What I'm asking from all of us is that we understand the problem and we advocate for right-sizing over or under-representation in data sets. But in the meantime, how do we mitigate? So we can apply responsible AI principles and tactics to our AI applications. There are various layers of an application that deploys AI within which we can mitigate. At the model level, it's important to understand the models that you use and any steps that might have been taken by the model developers to align the model towards its intended uses and to reduce risk. We call this fine-tuning. And just as one example, Microsoft has collaborated with OpenAI to additionally train the base models to build safety into the model itself. In addition to building safety, you may want to fine-tune a model to adapt to a new domain or genre, adapt to any newer data. A model's training is static to a particular point in time. So if you want the model to know about something more recent, you can fine-tune it with that additional, more recent data set. Fine-tuning can also improve performance on specific tasks or customized output like tone or personality. You can choose a small language model instead of an LLM. LLMs are built toward general intelligence, and small language models are more purpose-specific, and have smaller training data sets, and as a result, the risk of bias is generally lower. You can aim to avoid self-reinforcing feedback loops. As we saw in the predpol example, a closed system can result in a runaway feedback loop. Some feedback loops are useful. You want to balance your feedback loops with external human feedback. But don't rely 100% on human feedback with no internal feedback loop either, or you might end up with Tay. So balance the two. One level up from the model, an AI application can deploy a safety system that wraps around the base model and is run on every single user query. That provides another layer of protection, for example, blocking harmful content or employing content moderation. You can prepend that safety prompt to every model input. So here's an example where we prime the model to be helpful. We tell it, you're a helpful, respectful, and honest assistant. Always answer as helpfully as possible while being safe. And you can kind of see the decision tree of outputs here, right? So for a query to catalyze chaos and destruction without the safety prompt, the model might comply and tell you some wild stuff, as maybe we've seen on the internet. With it, it refuses to comply. One level up from the safety prompts, there's a meta prompt that can add additional protections. So you can help assure accuracy and that the model responses are grounded in the source material. Grounding means that there's a reference that the model can pull from. Ungrounded content means basically a hallucination. You can teach models to effectively use that grounded content that they find, and then you can even surface it to the user directly if you choose to. So here's an example comparing where a model received no meta prompt versus received a meta prompt not to do something, but no alternative, or received a meta prompt not to do something, but it did include alternative instructions what to do. So you can see the defect rate here dropped from 67% with no meta prompt to only 12% with meta prompt and alternative instructions. And the defect rate here being defined as when the model complies with something we don't want it to, like harmful content. And at the highest level, we have user experience. With Copilot, we're having success with asking the model to provide its sources and preemptively surface it in the UX. The goal being that it builds user confidence and the user can use that greater context to better prompt the AI. So for example, here I'm asking Copilot to tell me about the latest commit to the repo that I'm looking at. Copilot responds and also tells me a little bit about its internals, specifically which commit and which repo it's looking at to get me my answer. And as another example here, I'm asking Copilot for the GitHub policy on vacation time stored in our internal intranet called the Hub. And then again, Copilot responds, and it gives me details about the grounded content it's using to generate my answer. And this helps me build confidence that the model is not hallucinating. And finally, one last mitigation I'll cover today is what we call red team testing. So red team testing is adversarial stress testing to the system. The goal is to identify gaps or shortcomings in your existing safety systems, in your meta prompts or other mitigation strategies. You want to write test cases that stress test your system against adversarial requests. You want to run those tests, fix the failures, rinse and repeat. You can strive for a specific success rate. It can be 100% if that's what you're into. It can be something less than that. Whatever maps to like the risk tolerance that you're willing to carry. Some example categories of harm that we test for when we do red teaming for Copilot include harmful content, So that's your biases, malicious intent, dangerous information, things like that. Ungrounded content, so hallucinations. Generation of malware, incorrect or insecure code. Copilot is a code-focused AI, so we don't want any of that. Prompt injection or jailbreaks. Those are user attempts to override our safety system. If you go online, if you go on Reddit, there's like some really hilarious jailbreaks. We want to like test the different things that are out there and make sure that folks are not able to get past our safety systems. And the last one is IP protection and copyright issues. So to wrap up, I hope one of the takeaways you'll have from this is a deeper understanding about how, despite our best intentions, technologies meant to be neutral can and do cause harm. Responsible AI practices mitigate risk, but data sets are fallible, LLMs are non-deterministic, and humans are not perfect either. And it's up to all of us as leaders to have these conversations, to influence change, and to mitigate risk. Thank you so much for your attention. I would love to take your questions at the networking mixer. Thank you.